The economy is like a finely tuned machine. When one part falters, the entire system feels the impact. Today, we're diving into the first two chapters of a powerful three-part series examining how Donald Trump's immigration policies have left a lasting imprint on America's labor market and economy. From labor shortages in agriculture, construction, and hospitality, to the rising cost of food and disrupted supply chains, these policies have created ripple effects that are reshaping industries and everyday life. What's behind these economic challenges, and how are they affecting you? Let's unpack the first two parts of this unfolding story. Donald Trump's immigration policies, including stricter enforcement and the reduction of visa programs for seasonal and immigrant workers, have had a profound impact on labor availability in critical industries such as agriculture, construction, and hospitality. These sectors, which rely heavily on immigrant labor to sustain operations, have experienced significant disruptions. Let's explore how these policies have created ripple effects across the economy. The agricultural sector is one of the most affected by labor shortages, as it relies heavily on seasonal workers, many of whom are immigrants, to plant, maintain, and harvest crops. Under Trump's administration, policies such as tightening the H-2A visa program for temporary agricultural workers led to a decline in the available workforce. Without sufficient hands in the fields, farmers face delays in planting and harvesting, resulting in lower crop yields and financial losses. For example, fruits and vegetables like strawberries, lettuce, and tomatoes require manual harvesting to avoid damage. When labor is unavailable, crops are left to rot, reducing supply and driving up food prices. This issue extends beyond the farm food processors and distributors, which depend on consistent agricultural output, also experience disruptions. The Trump-era focus on reducing immigration compounded these problems, leaving farmers scrambling to find workers or abandoning entire fields of crops. The construction industry, already facing a labor shortage before Trump's presidency, saw the problem worsen due to reduced immigration and a crackdown on undocumented workers. Immigrants make up a significant portion of the construction workforce, especially in labor-intensive roles like masonry, framing, and roofing. Policies such as increased ICE raids and stricter documentation requirements discouraged both legal and undocumented workers from seeking employment in this sector. This labor gap has led to delayed infrastructure and housing projects, exacerbating the housing affordability crisis. For example, without enough workers to complete new housing developments, supply fails to meet demand, driving up home prices and rents. Public infrastructure projects such as roads and schools also face delays, impacting economic growth and the quality of life in affected communities. To attract workers, construction companies have been forced to raise wages, which increases project costs and strains budgets, particularly for government-funded initiatives. The hospitality sector, reliant on immigrant labor for roles in housekeeping, food service, and maintenance, has also struggled to recover from the pandemic due to labor shortages. Trump's policies, including the reduction of H-2B visas for seasonal non-agricultural workers, created a bottleneck in staffing for hotels, restaurants, and tourist attractions. This issue has been particularly pronounced in tourist-heavy regions like Florida, Nevada, and California, where the hospitality industry is a cornerstone of the local economy. Businesses have responded by reducing operating hours, limiting services, or even shutting down entirely. For example, some restaurants have cut back on menu options or closed for additional days each week due to insufficient staff. These changes not only reduce revenue but also discourage tourism, further harming local economies that depend on visitor spending. Trump's hardline immigration stance has left the industry struggling to rebuild its workforce at a time when demand for travel and dining is on the rise. Donald Trump's administration made sweeping changes to immigration policies, including stricter enforcement and reductions in work visas. These policies disproportionately affected the agricultural sector, which heavily relies on immigrant labor to maintain food production. The ripple effects are now evident in rising food prices, impacting everything from fresh produce to processed goods. Let's examine how these policies have contributed to higher grocery bills and what this means for the average consumer. Agriculture in the United States depends on a steady flow of seasonal workers to plant, harvest, and package crops. Many of these workers are immigrants, including those on H-2A visas or undocumented workers. Trump's restrictions on immigration and increased deportation efforts created significant labor shortages, leaving farmers without enough hands to bring crops from the field to the market. when labor is scarce, farmers are forced to make tough choices. Some prioritize harvesting higher-value crops while leaving others to rot. For example, crops like strawberries, lettuce, and tomatoes, highly perishable and labor-intensive, often suffer the most. The result is reduced supply, which pushes up prices for consumers. Basic economic principles dictate that when supply dwindles and demand remains steady, costs rise, and this is exactly what's happening at grocery stores across the country. The impact of labor shortages isn't limited to fresh fruits and vegetables. Processed foods, which rely on agricultural ingredients such as wheat, corn, and soy, are also affected. When the cost of raw materials increases due to reduced supply, food manufacturers pass those costs on to consumers. This means higher prices for everyday staples like bread, pasta, snacks, and even pet food. Meat prices have also seen significant increases, as livestock farming requires labor for feeding, care, and processing. A shortage of workers at meatpacking plants, already hit hard during the pandemic, has further exacerbated the issue, driving up the cost of beef, chicken, and pork. Rising food prices hit lower-income households the hardest, as they spend a larger portion of their income on groceries compared to wealthier families. For many, the increase in prices for basic staples forces difficult choices, such as buying less nutritious food or cutting back on other essentials, like healthcare and transportation. Trump's immigration policies have inadvertently created a situation where the most vulnerable segments of society bear the brunt of economic consequences. The restaurant industry, which relies on fresh ingredients, has also been impacted by rising food costs. As the price of produce, meat, and other staples increases, restaurants face higher operating expenses. To offset these costs, many have raised menu prices, reduced portion sizes, or eliminated certain items altogether. This not only affects consumers dining out but also the overall economy, as higher prices may deter spending in the hospitality sector. A recent study estimates that a 10% reduction in farm labor could result in a 5 to 10% increase in food prices. This underscores the critical role immigrant labor plays in keeping food affordable for American families. Without a sufficient workforce, the agricultural sector struggles to meet demand, creating a ripple effect that impacts every stage of the food supply chain. Supply chain vulnerabilities. Reduced agricultural output doesn't just affect grocery stores, it impacts food processing, distribution, and export markets, creating vulnerabilities across the supply chain. Inflationary pressures. Rising food prices contribute to overall inflation, further straining household budgets and slowing economic growth. Community impact. Rural farming communities, which depend on agricultural production for their livelihoods, face economic instability as labor shortages reduce farm income. We've uncovered how labor shortages and rising costs are rippling through critical industries and disrupting supply chains. But this is just the beginning. In the next and final part of this series, we'll explore the hidden costs of these policies, from tax revenue losses to the struggles of small businesses and farming communities. Don't miss it! Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're ready for the conclusion. Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you think these policies are shaping our future? See you in part 2.